if-else. Now, in the previous videos, we had the chance to learn about operators, and now we get to see how we can use them using the if-else statements to make some decisions in our code. Now, looking at the code, where can we make some decisions? In the place order function from our example, a user gets the chance to place an order for a pizza. But let's make sure that the user is actually paying for this pizza before we add it to our orders. Let's take a look at the structure of an if-else statement. Start by writing if, and your brackets, and then curly brackets. Anything that's in these brackets over here is known as the condition. If this is true, then the code inside of this block will execute. And it's perfectly fine to leave an if statement just like this. Let's say is 1 equal to 1. And of course it will always be equal to 1, so the code in this block will always run. So if we said if 1 is not equal to 1, then the code in this block will never run. Now this is a bit silly because comparing ones isn't that useful. However, let's change the condition to say message.value. Now message.value gives us the value sent to this function via the sender. Now we can ask if the value that was sent to this function is greater than 1 ether. And this is a very expensive pizza. So we're just going to check that the value should be greater or equal to 1 ether. And then we're actually going to add the pizza to the order, like so. As we can see, we have a little bit of an error, and this error explicitly says that because we are checking the value and we expect people to send actual ether to the function, we need to make this a payable function, and then that goes away. Let's clean this up and get our return statement right after our if statement. Okay, so let's analyze what's happening here. Someone's going to call the place order and pass in a pizza selection, maybe pizza 1, 2, or 3. We don't care about that for now. However, we are going to require the person to pay 1 ether to the function or to the smart contract to execute this code. Now, what happens if the person sends 0.9 ether? Well, the 0.9 ether will still be sent to the contract, although this code will not run. So technically, the person will pay 0.9 but not get a pizza in the orders. Now, this is problematic and can be solved, and I'm going to show you in the following videos how to solve that with things like require, revert, and assert, and making sure we block the operation before the ether actually comes in. Of course, we could also do an else statement. So if this condition is not true, right below the if statement we write else. And we can execute some code in here. So if this condition is not met, then the code in this block will run. So for example, if our condition wasn't met, let's refund the user by specifying a payable address, which will be the message.sender, like so. And now we actually get to transfer some ether. So we'll say transfer the message.value. Now here we technically going to refund the person's ETH if it didn't meet our requirement. And then this will kick off in the else statement. We are going to test this out right now. Remember, this will cost extra gas to send the ETH back and forth. And in my personal opinion, I think it's way better to use asserts to block the execution right from the beginning if the requirements of the ether sent is not met. Because you are working with funds, you need to be cautious of doing things like this. We will learn about asserts and how to do this properly in the following videos. However, let's go ahead and test this contract. Head over to deploy and let's deploy the contract. Now, as you can see, the place order has a red color. I'm going to place an order for a selection, maybe 3 pizza, maybe it's a small pizza. However, it's going to be the same price. Our account currently has 99.9, and we are not going to send any ether to this function when we execute it. Let's go and place the order. We can see that it didn't fail, it passed, but the value didn't really change. Now, what happens if we check if the order 1 is there? Nothing is there. Now, this is kind of expected because we didn't send any ether or way to this function. So let's go and try it again, but I'm going to switch to way and maybe enter some arbitrary number over here in way. Now, I don't know what this will be, but you know, way has 18 zeros, so I'm just going to say maybe something less than 18, so I make sure that this is indeed going to be less than 1 ether. I'm going to execute this again, and we can see that it did pass, but if we check the orders, there's still no order. But if we check the price, it looks like it's the same, but if we click on it, we can see that some gas was taken, and this is due to the transaction that took place for that refund. Now let's see what will happen if I supply the 1 ether. Now that I'm going to send the 1 ether, hopefully the if block code in here will execute, because the value should be at least greater or equal to 1 ether. So let me go down and place the order. We could see it was successful, and if we call the orders, we can see our order was accepted, and 1 ether was deducted from our account. And that is exactly how we can now make decisions in our code by using if-else statements. There is also a scenario that you might find where you need an if-else else-if statement, where you can actually add an else, if, and your brackets, the code, and it looks like this. Maybe we wanted to check a different condition. Maybe we wanted to see if the actual ether is greater than 2, greater or equal than 2. So this is a perfect example if you needed another if check before the else kicks off. Maybe this condition wasn't met, then it's going to check the next one, and if this isn't met, then it will kick off the else. Now, it's important to know the order of operations, because in this example, this really doesn't make sense. Technically, you should put the 2 here and the 1 over here. And the reason is because it's going to check this first, and if the value is not greater or equal to 2, then maybe the value might be greater or equal to 1. And if it's like this, it makes more sense that the else kicks off if these weren't met. It's important to know that in the if-else statement blocks, only the if or the else if will run, not all of them. It is also worth mentioning that you can have as many if-else statements and blocks that you need in your code. You can start one here, but just remember if there's no else, that's also fine to have it like this. Then it means that the code in this block will only run if this condition is met, and it will continue with its execution. And that is it for if-else and else-if statements. I'm going to remove this and just put the 1 back, because in the following videos, we will be looking at require, revert, and assert, and seeing how we can give a better example and block the execution before this code needs to refund a user.